My name is Mallory Winters, and I've spent the last decade of my life walking on eggshells in my own home. Today, those eggshells are about to shatter. Mallory, your father's legacy doesn't belong to you alone. Alara's voice dripped with entitlement, her eyes daring me to defy her. My mother-in-law stood in the doorway of my kitchen, her perfectly manicured nails tapping an impatient rhythm on the doorframe. I gripped the edge of the counter, willing myself to stay calm. Alara, we've been through this. My father's estate is not up for discussion. Don't be selfish, dear, she cooed, her saccharine tone barely masking her irritation. Gideon is your husband. What's yours is his, and what's his is mine. The absurdity of her statement almost made me laugh. Almost. That's not how it works, and you know it. Mallory. Gideon's voice called from the living room. Is everything okay? I closed my eyes, silently praying for strength. Everything's fine, honey. Your mother and I are just chatting. Alara's lips curled into a triumphant smirk. Yes, Gideon, darling. We're having a lovely conversation about family loyalty. I bit my tongue, tasting blood. Family loyalty. As if Alara knew the meaning of the word. Look, I said, keeping my voice low, I understand you're concerned about Gideon's business. But my father's money was never meant to be a crutch for this family. Alara's eyes narrowed. Your father supported this household for years. Are you saying you're too good for his help now? No, I'm saying dash. The shrill ring of my cell phone cut through the tension. I glanced at the caller ID. Dad's lawyer. I need to take this, I said, brushing past Alara. Her hand shot out, gripping my arm. This conversation isn't over, Mallory. I yanked my arm free, my patience finally snapping. Yes, it is. Stepping onto the back porch, I answered the call. Hello. Mrs. Winters? This is Charles Blackwood, your father's attorney. I'm calling about Raymond's will. My heart clenched. It had been 3 months since Dad's passing, and the wound still felt fresh. Yes, Mr. Blackwood. What can I do for you? There's been a development. Your father left some unexpected instructions. I think it's best if we meet in person to discuss the details. I frowned, confusion and curiosity warring within me. Of course. When? Tomorrow afternoon, if possible. My office, 2 p.m. I'll be there, I promised, my mind racing. As I ended the call, I turned to find Gideon standing in the doorway, his brow furrowed with concern. Everything okay, Mal? You look pale. I forced a smile, guilt gnawing at me for the relief I felt at his presence. Just some stuff about Dad's will. Nothing to worry about. He nodded, clearly unconvinced but unwilling to push. Mom's asking about dinner plans. Should I tell her we're eating out? The thought of spending an entire meal with Alara made my stomach churn. Actually, I'm not feeling great. Why don't you two go ahead without me? Gideon's face fell, and I hated myself a little for the lie. But I needed space, time to think. If you're sure, he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. Feel better, okay? As he turned to leave, I caught a whiff of unfamiliar perfume on his collar. My heart sank, another piece of my world threatening to crumble. I watched him go, the weight of unspoken words and mounting secrets pressing down on me. Tomorrow's meeting with the lawyer loomed large in my mind, a beacon of what? Hope? Change? One thing was certain. Something had to give. And soon. The law office of Blackwood and Associates felt cold and impersonal, much like the news I was about to receive. I smoothed my skirt, trying to quell the nervous energy coursing through me. Mrs. Winters. Charles Blackwood greeted me, his tone somber. Please have a seat. I perched on the edge of the leather chair, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Mr. Blackwood, what's this about? Has something changed with my father's will? He cleared his throat, shuffling papers on his desk. Your father, Raymond, was a complex man, Mrs. Winters. He had unconventional ideas about legacy. My heart raced. What do you mean? Your father has left you a substantial inheritance, he said, sliding a document across the desk, including a sum of $5 million and the deed to his historic family home on Maple Street. I stared at the paper, my vision blurring. $5 million? The house? But why? Blackwood's eyes softened. Raymond was proud of you, Mallory. He wanted to ensure your independence and happiness. A lump formed in my throat. Dad had always been my silent supporter. But this was beyond anything I'd imagined. There's more, Blackwood continued. The inheritance comes with a condition. The money and property are to be used at your sole discretion. No one else can make decisions regarding these assets. The implication hit me like a tidal wave. Dad had known. He'd seen the dynamics in my marriage, the constant pressure from Alara. This was his way of giving me an out. Thank you, I managed to whisper, gathering the papers with trembling hands. As I left the office, my phone buzzed incessantly. Alara. Of course. I answered, bracing myself. Hello. Well, Alara's voice crackled through the speaker. What did the lawyer say? How much did Raymond leave us? The old me would have stumbled, made excuses. But something had shifted. There is no us in this situation, Alara. The inheritance is mine. Don't be ridiculous, she snapped. You know Gideon's business needs capital. This is our chance to dash. No. I cut her off, surprising myself with my firmness. This is my father's legacy, and I'll honor it as I see fit. You ungrateful little dash. I ended the call, a strange mix of terror and exhilaration flooding my veins. When I arrived home, Gideon was waiting, his face a mask of concern. Mal, what's going on? Mom's on the warpath. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. We need to talk, Gideon. About the inheritance, about us, about everything. His brow furrowed. What do you mean? Your mother wants to use my father's money for your business, I said, watching his reaction carefully. Is that what you want too? Gideon's eyes darted away, guilt written across his features. Mal, you know how tight things have been. This could be our chance to turn everything around. Our chance? I echoed, the words tasting bitter. Or your mother's chance to sink her claws deeper into our lives? That's not fair, he protested weakly. Isn't it? I countered, years of pent-up frustration bubbling to the surface. When was the last time you made a decision without consulting her? When was the last time you stood up for me? Gideon's face crumpled. I don't know what you want from me, Mal. I want a partner, I said, my voice breaking. Not someone who lets his mother dictate our lives. A heavy silence fell between us, filled with unspoken truths and shattered illusions. What are you going to do? Gideon finally asked, his voice small. I squared my shoulders, feeling a newfound strength coursing through me. I'm going to honor my father's wishes. I'm going to use this inheritance to build something meaningful. And I'm going to do it on my own terms. As the words left my mouth, I realized this wasn't just about the money or the house. This was my breaking point, the moment I chose myself over the suffocating expectations that had defined my life for so long. Gideon's face fell, realization dawning in his eyes. Mal, please. We can work this out. But I was already moving, gathering my keys and jacket. I need some time, Gideon. To think, to breathe. As I walked out the door, I felt the weight of years lifting from my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like my own. The days following my confrontation with Gideon blurred together in a haze of tense silences and avoided glances. Our home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a battlefield where every word was a potential landmine. One morning, I found Gideon hunched over his laptop at the kitchen table, dark circles under his eyes. Another late night? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. He barely looked up. Mom's been helping me strategize for the business. We think we've found a way to turn things around. The casual mention of Alara sent a familiar surge of frustration through me. And what does the strategy involve? Gideon hesitated, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. Well, we were thinking, maybe we could use some of your inheritance as an investment. Just temporarily, of course. I felt the blood drain from my face. You discuss my inheritance with your mother? Mal, it's not like that. He backpedaled, finally meeting my gaze. We're family. We should be supporting each other. Family? I echoed, my voice rising. Is that what you call it when your mother constantly undermines me? When you can't make a single decision without her approval? Gideon's face hardened. That's not fair. Mom only wants what's best for us. For us, or for her? I shot back. The argument escalated, years of pent-up resentment spilling out. Gideon's voice grew louder, more defensive with each exchange. I barely recognized the man before me, so far removed from the person I'd fallen in love with. Maybe Mom's right, he finally snapped. Maybe you're just being selfish. The words hung in the air between us, sharp and irretrievable. In that moment, I saw with painful clarity the extent of Alara's influence, how deeply it had poisoned our relationship. I need some air, I muttered, grabbing my keys and jacket. I drove aimlessly, tears blurring my vision, until I found myself outside my father's old house, now my house. The Grand Victorian stood silent and imposing, a testament to a legacy I was only beginning to understand. As I approached the front door, a voice called out from next door. Well, if it isn't Raymond's girl. I turned to see an elderly woman waving from her porch, a knowing smile on her weathered face. Mrs. Beatrice? I asked, recognizing my father's longtime neighbor. The one and only, she chuckled. Come on over, dear. You look like you could use a cup of tea and a friendly ear. Grateful for the distraction, I joined Mrs. Beatrice on her porch. As she poured tea into delicate china cups, she regaled me with stories of my father, his kindness, his quiet strength, his dreams for the community. You know, she said, her eyes twinkling, Raymond always said that house was meant for more than just one family. He had big plans for it. I leaned forward, intrigued. What kind of plans? Mrs. Beatrice smiled. He talked about turning it into a place where people could come together, where the elderly in our community could find companionship and purpose. Your father had a big heart, Mallory. He saw potential where others saw problems. As she spoke, something stirred within me, a spark of inspiration, a glimmer of possibility. I thought about the inheritance, about my father's legacy, about the suffocating life I'd been living. Mrs. Beatrice, I said slowly, an idea taking shape. What would you think about helping me bring my father's vision to life? The old woman's face lit up. Oh, honey, I thought you'd never ask. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the porch, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. I knew what I had to do. Driving home, I steeled myself for the conversation ahead. Gideon was waiting, his face a mixture of guilt and apprehension. Mal, I'm sorry about earlier. I didn't mean dash. I held up a hand, cutting him off. Gideon, I've made a decision. I'm moving into my father's house. I need space. Time to figure things out. His face fell, but I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. And us. I took a deep breath. That depends on you. On whether you're ready to stand with me, or if you'll always stand with your mother. As I packed my bags, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was moving in the right direction, towards a future that was truly my own. The old Victorian creaked and groaned as I moved through its empty rooms, my footsteps echoing off bare walls. It had been a week since I'd left Gideon, and the house still felt more like a stranger than a home. But with each passing day, I could feel my father's presence growing stronger, guiding me towards something greater. I stood in what used to be the parlor, envisioning the possibilities. This could be a reading room, I murmured to myself, running my hand along the dusty mantelpiece. Talking to ghosts already? A familiar voice chuckled from the doorway. I spun around, startled. Mrs. Beatrice. I didn't hear you come in. The elderly woman shuffled into the room, her eyes twinkling with mischief. These old bones still have a few tricks up their sleeve. Now, tell me about these grand plans of yours. As we walked through the house, I shared my vision for the community center, a place where the elderly could gather, learn, and find purpose. Mrs. Beatrice listened intently, offering suggestions and sharing anecdotes about the neighborhood's needs. You know, she said, pausing by a large bay window, There's a group of us who've been meeting at the library for years. Book club, knitting circle, that sort of thing. But we've been running out of space. This could be perfect. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and for the first time since moving in, I felt a surge of excitement. Mrs. Beatrice, would you help me get the word out? I want to invite the community to be part of this from the ground up. She patted my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Oh, honey, just you wait. We'll have this place bustling in no time. As Mrs. Beatrice left, promising to spread the word, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about escaping Alara's influence or finding my own path. It was about honoring my father's legacy and making a real difference. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I met with contractors, researched zoning laws, and started drafting a business plan. Each step forward felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of the strength I'd lost over years of compromise. One afternoon, as I was sorting through old boxes in the attic, I came across a familiar face in a dusty photograph. Emmett, my childhood best friend, grinning beside me at some long-forgotten summer barbecue. I hadn't thought about him in years, but seeing his face brought back a flood of memories, of laughter, of understanding, of a connection untainted by manipulation or expectation. On impulse, I searched for him online, surprised to find he was living just a few towns over. Before I could talk myself out of it, I sent him a message, explaining my situation and inviting him to see the house. To my shock, he replied almost immediately. Mal, it's been too long. I'd love to catch up and see what you're up to. How's tomorrow? As I confirmed the plans, a mix of nervousness and anticipation bubbled in my chest. It felt like a lifeline to a simpler time, a reminder of who I used to be before Alara's influence had worn me down. The next day, as I waited for Emmett to arrive, my phone buzzed with a text from Gideon. We need to talk. Mom's been asking questions about the inheritance. Please call me. I stared at the screen, feeling the familiar weight of obligation settling over me. But before I could respond, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Emmett standing there, his smile just as warm and genuine as I remembered. Mal, he said, pulling me into a hug. It's so good to see you. As we embraced, I felt something shift inside me, a piece of the old Mallory, the one who stood up for herself and pursued her dreams, clicking back into place. Come on in, I said, leading him inside. I have so much to tell you. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen, truly heard. And as Emmett and I walked through the house, sharing ideas and laughing at old memories, I realized that this project wasn't just about creating a community center. It was about rebuilding myself, one room at a time. The community center project was gaining momentum, breathing new life into the old Victorian and into me. Each day brought new challenges and triumphs, from securing permits to organizing volunteer groups. Emmett had become a constant presence, his unwavering support and easy laughter a balm to my frayed nerves. One afternoon, as we were painting what would soon be the center's library, Emmett paused, his brush hovering mid-stroke. Mal, you're different, he said, his eyes searching my face. Happier, more. You. I felt a warmth spread through my chest at his words. I feel more like myself than I have in years, I admitted, realizing the truth of it as I spoke. Our moment was interrupted by the shrill ring of my phone. Gideon's name flashed on the screen, and my stomach twisted with a mix of concern and apprehension. I should take this, I said, stepping out onto the porch. Mal. Gideon's voice crackled through the speaker, sounding strained. I need to talk to you. In person. It's important. Despite my reservations, I agreed to meet him at a nearby cafe. As I hung up, I caught Emmett watching me, his expression unreadable. Everything okay? He asked, his tone carefully neutral. I nodded, forcing a smile. Just unfinished business. I won't be long. The cafe was bustling when I arrived, but Gideon was easy to spot, hunched over a table in the corner. As I approached, I was struck by how haggard he looked, his usual polished appearance replaced by rumpled clothes and dark circles under his eyes. Mal, he said, relief evident in his voice. Thank you for coming. I slid into the seat across from him. keeping my tone even. "What's going on, Gideon?" He ran a hand through his disheveled hair, his eyes darting nervously. "It's the business. Everything's fallen apart. The investors pulled out, and the bank's calling in our loans. I don't know what to do." A familiar pang of sympathy tugged at my heart, but it was quickly overshadowed by a surge of anger. "And let me guess, your mother suggested you come to me for help?" Gideon's flinch was all the confirmation I needed. "She means well, Mal. She's just trying to protect our future." "Our future?" I echoed, incredulity coloring my voice. "Gideon, we've been living separate lives for months. You chose your mother over me at every turn. And now that things have gone south, you expect me to bail you out?" His face crumpled, a mix of shame and desperation. "I know I've made mistakes, but Mal, we built this life together. Doesn't that count for something?" For a moment, I was tempted. The old Mallory, the one who bent over backwards to keep the peace, whispered that I should help him. But as I looked at Gideon, really looked at him, I saw the years of compromise, of putting my own dreams on hold for his ambitions and his mother's machinations. "I'm sorry, Gideon," I said, my voice soft but firm. "But I can't be your safety net anymore. I have my own life to build now." His expression hardened, a flash of his mother's manipulative nature shining through. "So that's it? You're just going to abandon me? After everything we've been through?" I stood, gathering my resolve. "I'm not abandoning you, Gideon. I'm choosing myself. Maybe it's time you did the same." As I walked away, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. It was a bittersweet victory, tinged with the ache of what could have been. But with each step, I felt stronger, more certain of my path. When I returned to the Victorian, Emmett was waiting on the porch, concern etched on his face. "How'd it go?" he asked gently. I took a deep breath, feeling the last vestiges of my old life falling away. "It went exactly as it needed to," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. Emmett nodded, understanding in his eyes. "What do you need?" I looked at the half-painted walls, the piles of donated books waiting to be shelved, the plans for a garden that would bring color and life to the community. "I need to finish what I started," I said, a newfound determination coursing through me. As we walked back into the house, I felt a shift, not just in my relationship with Gideon, but in my relationship with myself. For the first time in years, I was standing on my own 2 feet, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The community center was no longer just a project. It was a testament to my resilience, a symbol of the woman I was becoming. And as I picked up my paintbrush, I knew that this was only the beginning. The grand opening of the community center was just days away, and the old Victorian buzzed with activity. Volunteers scurried about, hanging curtains and arranging furniture, while Mrs. Beatrice directed operations like a seasoned general. I stood in the midst of it all, a surge of pride warming my chest. "Mallory, dear," Mrs. Beatrice called, waving me over. "The local paper wants to do a feature on the center. Isn't that wonderful?" I nodded, excitement mingling with a twinge of apprehension. Publicity meant exposure, and exposure meant my phone buzzed, as if on cue. An unknown number. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "Is this Mallory Winters?" a gruff voice asked. "I'm calling from the city planning office. We've received some concerning reports about your property." My stomach dropped. Concerning reports? What kind of reports? Zoning violations, safety hazards. "We'll need to conduct an immediate inspection before you can open to the public." As the caller rattled off a list of alleged infractions, my mind raced. None of this made sense. We'd meticulously followed every regulation, obtained every permit. "Unless—" "I understand," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "When can we expect the inspector?" "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp." I hung up, my hands shaking. This had Alara written all over it. "Mal." Emmett's concerned voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. "What's wrong?" I filled him in, watching his expression darken. "That manipulative witch," he muttered. "She won't stop until she's destroyed everything you've built." "Not everything," I said, a steely resolve settling over me. Not this time. We spent the night in a frenzy of preparation, double-checking every document, every safety measure. As dawn broke, I stood on the porch, watching a sleek black car pull up. A tall man in a crisp suit emerged, his face a mask of professional detachment. "Mrs. Winters? I'm here for the inspection." I led him through the house, answering his questions with calm precision. But as we reached the second floor, a commotion erupted from outside. "You can't do this." Alara's shrill voice carried through the open window. "That house belongs to my son." My heart raced as I hurried downstairs, the inspector close behind. Outside, Alara stood toe-to-toe with Mrs. Beatrice, a small crowd of neighbors gathering to watch. "Your son?" Mrs. Beatrice scoffed. "Honey, this house belongs to Mallory, and she's doing more good with it than your family ever did." Alara's face contorted with rage. "You don't know anything. This community center is a sham. It's unsafe, it's illegal, and I won't stand by while dash." "While what, Alara?" I interrupted, stepping onto the porch. "While I use my inheritance the way my father intended. While I build something that actually helps people." She whirled on me, eyes flashing. "You ungrateful little dash." "That's enough." The inspector's authoritative voice cut through the tension. He turned to me, his expression softening slightly. "Mrs. Winters, I've seen enough. Your center not only meets but exceeds all safety and zoning requirements. You're clear to open as scheduled." A cheer went up from the gathered neighbors. Alara's face drained of color as she realized her plan had backfired spectacularly. "You haven't heard the last of this," she hissed, but her words lacked their usual venom. As she stormed off, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Emmett stood beside me, a mixture of pride and concern in his eyes. "You okay?" I took a deep breath, surveying the scene before me. Mrs. Beatrice was regaling the neighbors with a blow-by-blow account of her confrontation with Alara. The inspector was chatting amiably with a group of volunteers. And through the open door, I could see the center, my father's legacy, my own dream, ready to welcome its first visitors. "You know what?" I said, a smile spreading across my face. "I'm better than okay. I'm free." As the crowd dispersed and we headed back inside to finish preparations, I felt a shift in the air. Alara's desperate attempt to sabotage the center had only strengthened my resolve and united the community behind me. The grand opening was no longer just a celebration of the center. It was a declaration of independence, a testament to the power of choosing oneself. And as I looked at Emmett, at Mrs. Beatrice, at all the people who had rallied around this project, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I wouldn't face them alone. The reckoning had come, and I had emerged stronger for it. Now it was time to build the future, on my terms. The grand opening of the community center was a resounding success. Laughter and chatter filled the once empty rooms, elderly residents exploring their new haven with gleaming eyes. As I watched Mrs. Beatrice lead a lively tour group, pride swelled in my chest. This was everything my father had dreamed of, everything I had fought for. "Mallory?" A familiar voice cut through the joyous din. I turned to see Gideon standing in the doorway, looking lost and out of place. "Gideon," I said, surprise coloring my tone. "I didn't expect to see you here." He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting around the room. "Can we talk? Privately?" Nodding, I led him to the small office I'd set up in the back of the house. As I closed the door behind us, the muffled sounds of the celebration faded away, leaving a heavy silence. "What is it, Gideon?" I asked, crossing my arms. He took a deep breath, running a hand through his disheveled hair. I've left my mother's house. I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened, about the choices I've made." My heart quickened, a mix of hope and wariness coursing through me. And I realize now how wrong I've been," he said, his voice cracking. "How I let my mother control me, control us."
"I'm so sorry, Mal."
"For everything." Before I could respond, the door burst open. Alara stormed in, her face contorted with rage. "There you are," she spat at Gideon. How dare you abandon me like this? After everything I've done for you? Gideon flinched, but stood his ground. Mother, please. This has to stop. You can't keep manipulating us like this. Alara's eyes narrowed, her gaze shifting between Gideon and me. Us? There is no us anymore. She left you, remember? She chose this ridiculous project over her own family. No, Mother, Gideon said, his voice growing stronger. You drove her away. You've been driving everyone away for years with your schemes and your control. I watched in stunned silence as Gideon, for the first time in our marriage, stood up to his mother. Alara's face paled, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. How can you say that? She whispered, her voice trembling. Everything I've done for you. No, Gideon countered, shaking his head. You did it for yourself. To keep me dependent on you, to keep Mallory under your thumb. But it ends now. Alara's eyes flashed dangerously. You ungrateful child. I gave you everything. You gave me nothing but fear and insecurity, Gideon shot back. Mallory showed me what real love and support look like. She built this place, helped all these people, while you were busy tearing everything down. As mother and son faced off, years of resentment and manipulation bubbling to the surface, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. This was the confrontation we'd been hurtling towards for years, the moment of truth that would define our futures. Enough, I said quietly, but with enough force to silence them both. They turned to me, as if suddenly remembering I was there. Alara, you're not welcome here. Not after everything you've done to sabotage this place, to sabotage me. Alara's mouth opened and closed, but for once, she seemed at a loss for words. And Gideon, I continued, meeting his gaze. I appreciate your apology, and I'm proud of you for standing up to your mother. But it doesn't erase the years of hurt and neglect. His face fell, but he nodded in understanding. I know. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. I want a chance to make things right, to support you the way I should have all along. I took a deep breath, weighing my words carefully. I can't promise anything, Gideon, but I'm willing to try, on my terms. As Alara stormed out, muttering threats and curses, Gideon and I shared a look of cautious hope. The air felt lighter somehow, as if a poisonous fog had finally lifted. Outside the office, the sounds of laughter and conversation reminded me of the new life I'd built, the community I'd fostered. Whatever happened with Gideon, whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew I had the strength to face them. For the first time in years, the future felt wide open, full of possibility. And I was ready to embrace it on my own terms. 6 months had passed since the confrontation with Alara, and the community center had blossomed beyond my wildest dreams. The once empty rooms now buzzed with activity, art classes, book clubs, and lively discussions filling every corner of the old Victorian. As I walked through the garden, where residents tended to raised beds bursting with vegetables and flowers, I caught sight of Mrs. Beatrice leading a Tai Chi class on the lawn. Her movements were slow but graceful, a far cry from the frail woman I'd first met. Looking good, Mrs. B. I called out, earning a wink and a wave from the spirited octogenarian. All thanks to you, dear, she replied, not missing a beat in her routine. This place has given us all a new lease on life. I smiled, warmth spreading through my chest. This was my father's legacy, realized in ways I never could have imagined. As I made my way back inside, I spotted Gideon chatting with a group of veterans in the common room. Over the past months, he'd become a regular volunteer, slowly rebuilding trust and finding his own place in this community we'd created. Our relationship was different now, no longer husband and wife, but partners in a shared vision. It wasn't always easy, but it was honest in a way it had never been before.
My.
Emmett's voice pulled me from my thoughts. He jogged up, a mischievous glint in his eye. You'll never guess who just called.
Who?
The mayor's office. They want to use our center as a model for a citywide program. They're talking about funding, expansion, the works. I gasped, my mind reeling with the possibilities. Emmett, that's incredible. We could help so many more people create a real change in the community. He grinned, pulling me into a tight hug. We already have, Mal. You already have. As we broke apart, I caught the softness in his gaze, the unspoken something that had been growing between us. It was new and fragile, but filled with promise, much like the life I'd built for myself. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, I found myself alone in my father's old study. The room had become my sanctuary, a place to reflect and recharge. I ran my fingers along the spines of his books, pausing at a worn copy of his favorite poem. As I pulled it from the shelf, a folded piece of paper fluttered to the floor. With trembling hands, I unfolded it, recognizing my father's handwriting immediately. My dearest Mallory, if you're reading this, it means you've found your way back to yourself. I always knew you had the strength to break free from the chains that bound you, whether they were of your own making or placed upon you by others. This house, this legacy, was never meant to be a burden. It was a gift, a chance for you to discover your own power and purpose. I see now that you've done just that, in ways more beautiful than I could have imagined. Remember, my darling girl, that true strength lies not in standing alone, but in lifting others up alongside you. You've created a community, a family bound not by blood, but by shared dreams and compassion. I am so proud of you, Mallory. Not for what you've built, but for who you've become. All my love, Dad. Tears streamed down my face as I clutched the letter to my chest. In that moment, I felt my father's presence more strongly than I had since his passing. A soft knock at the door pulled me back to the present. Emmett stood in the doorway, concern etched on his face. Everything okay? I nodded, wiping my eyes and managing a watery smile. Better than okay. I finally understand what all of this was meant to be. As I shared the letter with Emmett, his arm wrapped comfortingly around my shoulders, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. The journey had been long and often painful, but it had led me exactly where I needed to be. Outside, the sounds of laughter and conversation drifted up from the garden, where residents and volunteers were gathering for the weekly community dinner. My community. My family. Shall we? Emmett asked, offering his hand. I took it, feeling the warmth of his palm against mine. Let's go home, I said, realizing that for the first time in my life, I truly understood what that word meant. As we walked downstairs to join the others, I carried with me the weight of my father's approval, the lightness of my newfound freedom, and the strength of the bonds I'd forged. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them, not as the woman I once was, but as the woman I'd become. A woman who had learned to stand on her own, to lift others up, and to create a legacy of love and compassion that would ripple out far beyond the walls of this old Victorian house. This was my new dawn, and it was more beautiful than I ever could have imagined. My name is Lydia Pearson, and I never thought I'd find myself packing my life into boxes at 55. Yet here I am, carefully wrapping photo frames and mementos while my husband of 30 years paces downstairs, his footsteps echoing through the house we once called our dream home. The creak of the front door sends a chill down my spine. I know who it is without looking. Gideon? Eleanor's shrill voice carries up the stairs. Is she gone yet? I take a deep breath, steeling myself for what's to come. With one last glance around the bedroom, I pick up my suitcase and head downstairs. The living room falls silent as I enter. Gideon stands by the fireplace, his face a mask of indifference. Eleanor and Vernon, my soon-to-be ex-in-laws, perch on the sofa like vultures waiting to pick at a carcass. Well, Eleanor snaps, her eyes narrowing. What are you waiting for? I meet her gaze, refusing to be cowed. I'm leaving, Eleanor. Isn't that what you've always wanted? Vernon clears his throat. Now, Lydia, there's no need for dramatics. This is for the best, you know. The best for whom? I can't help but ask, even though I know the answer. Gideon finally speaks, his voice cold and unrecognizable. You never belonged here, Lydia. The words sting, but I won't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Instead, I straighten my spine and look him directly in the eye. You're right, Gideon. I don't belong here anymore. I turn to leave, but Eleanor's voice stops me. Don't forget to leave your keys. With deliberate slowness, I reach into my pocket and pull out my keyring. The house key glints in the afternoon light as I place it on the side table. I hope you're happy now, I say, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Eleanor's lips curl into a smug smile. Oh, we will be, won't we, Gideon? I watch as my husband nods, avoiding my gaze. In that moment, I see him for what he truly is, a puppet, dancing to his parents' tune. As I step out onto the porch, a wave of emotions threatens to overwhelm me. But I push it down, focusing on the path ahead. I've anticipated this moment for months, quietly preparing for the inevitable. Lydia, Gideon calls out, following me to my car. For a moment, I see a flicker of the man I once loved. I'm sorry it came to this. I pause, my hand on the car door. Are you Gideon? Are you really? He falters, glancing back at the house where his parents watch from the window. It's complicated. No, I say, shaking my head. It's actually very simple. You chose them over me, over us. You always have. That's not fair, he protests weakly. I laugh, a short, bitter sound. Fair? Was it fair when your mother criticized every decision I made? When your father belittled my career? When you stood by and let it happen year after year? Gideon's face crumples, but I'm beyond caring. I've spent too many years trying to fit into a family that never wanted me. Goodbye, Gideon, I say, climbing into my car. I hope you enjoy the life they've chosen for you. As I drive away, I catch a glimpse of Gideon in my rearview mirror, standing alone on the driveway. For a moment, I feel a pang of sadness for the life we could have had. But then I remember the look of triumph on Eleanor's face, and my resolve hardens. They think they've won, but they have no idea what's coming. I may be leaving this house, but I'm far from defeated. In fact, this is just the beginning. Eleanor, Vernon, and Gideon are about to learn that they've severely underestimated Lydia Pearson. And I can't wait to teach them that lesson. The motel room feels sterile and impersonal, but it's a sanctuary compared to the suffocating atmosphere I left behind. I sit on the edge of the bed, a photo album open on my lap, tracing the contours of a younger, happier version of myself. Where did we go wrong, Gideon? I whisper to the smiling face in the photograph. A knock at the door startles me. Lydia? It's Ruth. Can I come in? I open the door to find my best friend holding a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. I thought you could use this, she says, her eyes full of concern. As we settle on the small couch, Ruth pours the wine. How are you holding up? I take a long sip before answering. I don't know. Angry, relieved, scared. That's understandable, Ruth nods. Want to talk about it? The words tumble out, a torrent of memories and emotions I've kept bottled up for years. I tell her about the early days of my marriage to Gideon, how we'd been so in love, so full of dreams. We were going to conquer the world together, I say, a wry smile on my face. But then, his parents, Ruth finishes for me. I nod, remembering the first time I met Eleanor and Vernon. Their disapproval had been palpable, their smiles tight and insincere. They never thought I was good enough for their precious son. But Gideon loved you, Ruth reminds me gently. He did. I agree, my voice barely above a whisper. At least, I thought he did. I recount how things changed gradually, how Eleanor's subtle digs became more frequent, how Vernon's dismissive attitude towards my career grew more pronounced, and how Gideon, caught between his wife and his parents, slowly began to drift away. I tried so hard to make it work, I say, tears threatening to spill. I renovated that house, thinking if I could just make it perfect. Ruth takes my hand. It wasn't your fault, Lydia. You can't change people who don't want to change. Her words hit home, and suddenly, I see the truth of my situation with startling clarity. The house I'd poured my heart and soul into wasn't a home, it was a prison. A gilded cage where I'd been slowly suffocating, trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. You're right, I say, straightening my shoulders. I've been holding on to a dream that died a long time ago. Ruth smiles, a glint of mischief in her eyes. So, what are you going to do now? I think about the mortgage transfer I'd quietly arranged, knowing Gideon and his parents were planning to sell the house behind my back. A small smile plays on my lips. I'm going to take back control of my life. That's my girl. Ruth cheers, raising her glass. To new beginnings. As we clink glasses, I feel a weight lifting from my shoulders. The road ahead won't be easy, but for the first time in years, I feel truly free. Later that night, as I lie in the unfamiliar bed, my phone buzzes with a text. It's from Elijah, our son. Mom, I heard what happened. Are you okay?
Can we talk?
My heart swells with love and gratitude. Despite everything, I have my son's support. I type back a quick reply, arranging to meet him for coffee the next day. As I drift off to sleep, I realize that the house I left behind was never really my home. Home, I now understand, is not a place, it's the people who love and support you no matter what. Tomorrow, I'll start building my new home, brick by brick, on my own terms. And neither Gideon nor his parents will have any say in it. The thought brings a smile to my face as I close my eyes, ready to face whatever challenges the new day might bring. The cafe bustles with morning activity as I wait for Elijah. My fingers drum nervously on the table, anticipation building in my chest. When I spot him weaving through the crowd, my heart swells with pride. He's grown into such a fine young man, despite the turmoil of our family life. Mom, Elijah says, wrapping me in a tight hug. I'm so sorry about everything. I squeeze him back, fighting tears. It's not your fault, sweetheart. How are you holding up? We settle into our seats, and Elijah's face grows serious. I'm worried about you, Mom. Dad's been acting strange, and Grandma and Grandpa are on the warpath. A chill runs down my spine. What do you mean? Elijah leans in, lowering his voice. I overheard them talking. They're planning to sell the house, Mom. Without telling you. The betrayal hits me like a physical blow, but I'm not entirely surprised. I'd suspected something was amiss for weeks. I see, I say, keeping my voice steady. And your father is going along with this? Elijah nods, his expression a mix of anger and disappointment. He's completely under their thumb. I tried to talk to him, but he won't listen. I reach across the table, squeezing his hand. Thank you for telling me, Elijah. I appreciate your honesty. As we finish our coffee, I make a decision. It's time to protect myself and ensure that Gideon and his parents face the consequences of their actions. Later that day, I visit my lawyer, Sarah. Her office is a haven of calm professionalism, a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil I've been experiencing. Lydia, Sarah greets me warmly. What can I do for you today? I take a deep breath, steeling myself. I need to make some changes to our mortgage arrangement. Sarah listens intently as I explain the situation, her expression growing more concerned with each detail. When I finish, she leans back in her chair, considering. What you're proposing is legal, she says slowly, but it's a bold move. Are you sure about this? I nod, my resolve strengthening. I'm sure. They've left me no choice. Over the next hour, we draft the necessary paperwork to transfer the mortgage solely into Gideon's name. It's a risky move, but one that will protect my financial interests and force Gideon to face the reality of his choices. As I leave Sarah's office, a mix of emotions swirls within me. Part of me feels guilty for taking such drastic action, but a stronger part knows it's necessary. I've spent too many years being the accommodating wife, the peacemaker. It's time to stand up for myself. That evening, as I sit in my motel room, my phone buzzes with a text from Gideon. We need to talk. Can you meet me at the house tomorrow? I stare at the message, my heart racing. Does he know what I've done? Has Elijah said something? After a moment's hesitation, I type back a simple reply. Okay. 10 a.m. Sleep eludes me that night as I toss and turn, imagining all the possible scenarios for tomorrow's confrontation. But beneath the anxiety, there's a current of strength I haven't felt in years. I'm no longer the woman who will bend to Gideon's will or cower before Eleanor and Vernon's disapproval. As dawn breaks, I rise and prepare myself for the day ahead. I choose my outfit carefully, a smart blouse and trousers that make me feel confident and powerful. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognize the woman staring back at me. Her eyes are clear, her posture straight. She looks ready for battle. "You can do this, Lydia," I tell my reflection. "You're stronger than they know." With one last deep breath, I grab my keys and head out the door. It's time to face Gideon and set my plan in motion. Whatever happens next, I know I'm ready. The days of being a victim are over. Now, it's my turn to take control. The key turns in the lock of my new apartment, and I step inside, breathing in the scent of fresh paint and possibility. It's small, nothing like the sprawling house I left behind, but it's mine. All mine. "Well, what do you think?" Ruth asks, setting down a box labeled kitchen. I turn to her, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "It's perfect." We spend the afternoon unpacking, filling the empty spaces with pieces of my life. Each item I place feels like a small act of defiance against the control Gideon and his parents tried to exert over me. As evening falls, Ruth and I collapse onto the couch, surveying our handiwork. "You know," she says, a mischievous glint in her eye, "I've been thinking about those crafting classes you used to teach." I raise an eyebrow. "What about them? Why don't you start them up again?" The community center is always looking for new instructors. The idea takes root, growing with each passing moment. "You really think I could?" Ruth rolls her eyes. "Lydia, you're the most talented crafter I know. Of course you could." The next morning, fueled by Ruth's encouragement and my own determination, I march into the community center. The director, a kind-faced woman named Maria, listens intently as I pitch my idea for a series of crafting classes. "This sounds wonderful, Lydia," she says, her eyes lighting up. "When can you start?" Just like that, I have a new purpose. I throw myself into planning the classes, rediscovering the joy that creating with my hands has always brought me. It's more than just a distraction from the pain of my failed marriage. It's a lifeline, pulling me towards a future I'm excited to embrace. The day of my first class arrives, and I'm a bundle of nerves. What if no one shows up? What if I've forgotten how to teach? But as people begin to trickle in, their faces eager and curious, my anxiety melts away. "Welcome, everyone," I say, surprised by the strength in my voice. "Today, we're going to learn the art of paper quilling." As I demonstrate the technique, guiding my students through each step, I feel a sense of fulfillment I haven't experienced in years. This is who I am, who I've always been, before Gideon and his parents tried to mold me into their idea of the perfect wife. After class, a young woman approaches me, her completed project clutched proudly in her hands. "Thank you, Mrs.
Pearson," she says.
I never thought I could make something so beautiful." I smile, touched by her words. "It's MS. Pearson now," I correct gently. "And you're very welcome. The beauty was always there. You just needed to discover it." As I lock up the classroom, my phone buzzes. It's a text from Elijah. "How was your first day of classes, Mom? So proud of you." Tears prick at my eyes, but they're tears of joy. Despite everything, I have my son's support, and that means more than any house or marriage ever could. Walking home, I feel lighter than I have in years. The setting sun paints the sky in vibrant hues, and I'm struck by how long it's been since I truly appreciated such simple beauty. I've been so focused on surviving, on trying to please Gideon and his parents, that I forgot how to live. But not anymore. With each step, each breath, I'm reclaiming my life. The road ahead won't be easy. I know there will be challenges, moments of doubt and fear. But for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to face them. As I reach my apartment building, I pause, looking up at the window I now call home. It's not the grand house I once shared with Gideon, but it's a sanctuary of my own making. A place where I can be myself, without judgment or criticism. I climb the stairs, my mind already buzzing with ideas for tomorrow's class. The future stretches out before me, full of possibilities I'm only beginning to imagine. And I can't wait to explore every single one of them. The sharp knock on my apartment door cuts through the peaceful Saturday morning like a knife. I freeze, paintbrush in hand, recognizing the aggressive rhythm instantly.
Gideon.
Lydia, open this door right now. His voice, muffled but unmistakably furious, sends a chill down my spine. I take a deep breath, steeling myself. This confrontation was inevitable, but I hadn't expected it so soon. Carefully setting down my half-finished craft project, I move towards the door. As I turn the handle, I'm greeted by a sight that would have once terrified me. Gideon, red-faced and seething, flanked by Eleanor and Vernon. Their expressions a mix of anger and smug satisfaction. Well, Eleanor sneers, pushing past me into the apartment. So this is where you've been hiding. I stand my ground, refusing to be intimidated. I'm not hiding, Eleanor. What do you want? Gideon thrusts a stack of papers in my face. What the hell is this, Lydia? How dare you transfer the mortgage to my name? I meet his gaze steadily. I did what I had to do to protect myself, Gideon. You were planning to sell the house without my knowledge, weren't you? His momentary flicker of guilt confirms my suspicions. Vernon steps forward, his voice dripping with condescension. Now, Lydia, be reasonable. We were only trying to do what's best for everyone. Best for everyone? I laugh, the sound hollow and bitter. You mean best for yourselves. You've never had my interests at heart, any of you. Eleanor's eyes narrow dangerously. Watch your tone, young lady. We've put up with your ingratitude for far too long. Ingratitude. The word ignites a fire within me. I gave 30 years of my life to this family. I renovated that house, supported Gideon's career, raised our son. And all I got in return was criticism and manipulation. Gideon's face pales. Lydia, that's not fair. We can work this out. Just transfer the mortgage back and we can talk about it. I shake my head, feeling a strange calm settle over me.
No, Gideon.
I'm done talking. I'm done compromising. You made your choice when you sided with your parents over me, time and time again. But we can't afford the payments, he explodes. You've ruined us. I've ruined you? I repeat incredulously. You are going to sell our home, the home we built together, without even telling me. You've been letting your parents dictate our lives for years. If anyone's ruined this family, Gideon, it's you. Eleanor steps forward, her voice sickly sweet. Now, Lydia, let's not be hasty. We're family after all. Surely we can come to some arrangement. I turn to her, years of pent-up frustration finally finding voice. We're not family, Eleanor. We never were. You made that abundantly clear from the day I married your son. Vernon's face darkens. You ungrateful little. That's enough. I cut him off, surprising even myself with the authority in my voice. I want all of you to leave.
Now.
Gideon reaches for my arm, his expression desperate. Lydia, please. We can't lose the house. Where will we go? For a moment, I almost waver. But then I remember the years of subtle put-downs, the constant criticism, the way they slowly chipped away at my self-worth. I gently, but firmly remove his hand. That's not my problem anymore, Gideon. You chose your parents over me. Now you can live with that choice. As I usher them towards the door, Eleanor turns, her face twisted with malice. This isn't over, Lydia. You'll regret this. I meet her gaze unflinchingly. No, Eleanor. The only thing I regret is not doing this years ago. The door closes behind them, and I lean against it, my heart pounding. But beneath the adrenaline, I feel something else, pride. For the first time in years, I stood up for myself. I refused to be manipulated or cowed. As I returned to my craft table, I realized that Eleanor was right about one thing. This isn't over. But whatever comes next, I'll face it on my own terms. The days of being a victim are behind me. Now, I'm the author of my own story, and I intend to make it a good one. The weeks following Gideon's unexpected visit pass in a blur of activity. I throw myself into my crafting classes, finding solace in the rhythmic motions of creation and the genuine appreciation of my students. But beneath the surface, a storm is brewing. One crisp autumn morning, as I'm setting up for class, my phone buzzes with a text from Elijah. Mom, we need to talk. Dad's not doing well. My heart clenches, a mix of concern and frustration washing over me. Despite everything, I can't help but worry about Gideon. I arranged to meet Elijah for coffee after my class. The local cafe is bustling when I arrive, but Elijah's troubled face stands out in the crowd. As I slide into the seat across from him, he doesn't waste time with pleasantries. "Dad's a mess, Mom," he says, his voice low and urgent. He's drowning in debt, and Grandma and Grandpa are making everything worse. They're constantly berating him, blaming him for losing the house. I feel a pang of guilt, quickly followed by a surge of anger. "Elijah, your father made his choices. He chose to side with them over me for years." Elijah nods, his expression torn. "I know, Mom, but I think he's finally starting to see the truth. He called me last night completely broken. He said he's realized how much damage his parents have done, to him and to you." I sit back, stunned. After all these years, could Gideon finally be waking up to the reality of his parents' manipulation? "What do you want me to do, Elijah?" I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. He reaches across the table, taking my hand. "Just
Talk to him, Mom. Please."
I think he needs to make amends, for his sake as much as yours. Against my better judgment, I agree to meet Gideon. The next day, I find myself sitting in a park, watching as my estranged husband approaches. The man before me is a far cry from the confident, controlling figure who stormed into my apartment weeks ago. He looks haggard, defeated. "Lydia," he says, his voice hoarse. "Thank you for meeting me." I nod, keeping my expression neutral. "What do you want, Gideon?" He collapses onto the bench beside me, his shoulders slumping. I owe you an apology. So many apologies, I don't even know where to start." "The beginning might be good," I say, surprised by the lack of bitterness in my voice. Gideon takes a shaky breath. "I've been a fool, Lydia. For years, I let my parents control me, control us. I thought I was being a good son, but I was just being a coward. I was so afraid of disappointing them that I ended up destroying the best thing in my life, our marriage." I listen in silence, my emotions a tangled mess. Part of me wants to comfort him, while another part screams to guard my heart. "I understand if you can't forgive me," he continues. "But I needed you to know that I see it now. I see how wrong I was, how much I hurt you, and I'm so sorry." For a moment, I'm transported back to the early days of our marriage, when Gideon was kind and loving, before his parents' influence poisoned everything. But then I remember the years of pain, of feeling invisible and unvalued in my own home. "I appreciate your apology, Gideon," I say carefully, "but it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't erase the pain or the years we lost." He nods, his eyes filled with regret. "I know. I don't expect you to take me back or to fix things. I needed you to know that I understand now. And I'm going to make changes, starting with setting boundaries with my parents." As I watch Gideon walk away, his shoulders bowed under the weight of his realizations, I feel a strange mix of emotions. There's relief that he finally sees the truth, sadness for the years we lost, and a surprising sense of freedom. I realize that Gideon's apology, while appreciated, doesn't change my path forward. I've found strength in my independence, in the life I'm building for myself. And while the wounds of the past may never fully heal, I'm no longer defined by them. As I head home, I feel lighter, as if a burden I didn't even know I was carrying has been lifted. The future stretches out before me, full of possibilities, and for the first time in years, I'm excited to see where it leads. The crisp autumn air carries a sense of change as I make my way to the community center for my weekly crafting class. My phone buzzes insistently in my pocket, but I ignore it, focusing on the day ahead. It's only when I reach the parking lot that I finally check the messages. My heart sinks as I see a barrage of texts from Elijah. "Mom, things have gotten worse. Grandma and Grandpa are tearing Dad apart. He needs help." I take a deep breath, steeling myself for what's to come. After class, I drive to Gideon's apartment, a sense of dread growing with each mile. The building is run down, a far cry from our once pristine home. I knock on the door, half expecting to be greeted by Eleanor's disapproving scowl. Instead, Gideon opens the door, looking more haggard than ever. "Lydia," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't expect you to come." I step inside, taking in the chaos of the small apartment. Elijah was worried. I explain, keeping my voice neutral. "What's going on, Gideon?" He collapses onto a worn couch, his head in his hands. "It's all falling apart, Lydia. The house. I can't keep up with the payments. And my parents." As if on cue, the door bursts open, revealing Eleanor and Vernon. Their eyes narrow when they see me. "What is she doing here?" Eleanor spits, her voice dripping with venom. I stand my ground, meeting her gaze. "I'm here because my son is worried about his father." "What are you doing here, Eleanor?" Vernon steps forward, his face red with anger. "We're here to knock some sense into our son." "This is all your fault, Lydia. If you hadn't been so selfish." "Enough." Gideon's voice cuts through the tension. We all turn to look at him, shocked by the sudden outburst. "I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending." Eleanor's face softens, her voice sickly sweet. "Darling, what are you talking about? We're only trying to help." "No," Gideon interrupts, his voice gaining strength. "You're not helping. You never have. All you've ever done is control and manipulate me. You drove Lydia away, and now you're trying to blame her for the mess you created." I watch in stunned silence as years of pent-up frustration pour out of Gideon. He turns to me, his eyes filled with regret. "I'm so sorry, Lydia. I should have stood up to them years ago. I should have chosen you." Eleanor's face contorts with rage. "How dare you speak to us like this? After everything we've done for you." "What have you done for me?" Gideon demands. "You've criticized every decision I've made. You've undermined my marriage, my career, my happiness. And for what? To keep me under your thumb?" Vernon steps forward, his voice cold. "If that's how you feel, then perhaps it's time we wash our hands of you entirely. Good luck keeping that house without our help." As Eleanor and Vernon storm out, slamming the door behind them, a heavy silence falls over the apartment. Gideon looks shell-shocked, as if he can't quite believe what just happened. I find myself moving to sit beside him, my hand hovering uncertainly over his shoulder. "Gideon," I say softly, "are you okay?" He looks at me, tears in his eyes. "I don't know. I feel like I've just woken up from a long nightmare. How could I have been so blind?" In that moment, I see glimpses of the man I once loved, vulnerable, honest, free from his parents' influence. But I also see the years of pain and betrayal that stand between us. "It's not too late to start over," I say carefully. "Not with me, but for yourself. You deserve to live your own life, Gideon." He nods slowly, a mix of fear and hope in his eyes. I don't even know where to begin. As I stand to leave, I feel a weight lifting from my shoulders. The anger and bitterness I've carried for so long begin to dissipate, replaced by a sense of closure. "You begin by putting one foot in front of the other," I tell him. "And you keep going no matter how hard it gets." That's what I did, and look at me now. As I walk out of Gideon's apartment, I feel a surge of pride and strength. I've faced my past, stood up to Eleanor and Vernon, and come out stronger on the other side. The future stretches out before me, full of possibilities, and I'm ready to embrace it with open arms. The sun streams through the windows of my new studio, illuminating the colorful array of crafting supplies and finished projects. It's been a year since I walked away from my old life, and the transformation is nothing short of miraculous. My phone chimes with a notification. Another comment on my latest blog post. I smile as I read it. "Lydia, your story has given me the courage to leave my own toxic relationship. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to start over." Messages like these flood in daily, each one a reminder that my journey has become more than just my own story. It's a beacon of hope for others trapped in situations similar to the one I escaped. The door chimes, and I look up to see Elijah walking in, a proud smile on his face. "Mom, this place is amazing," he says, looking around in awe. "I can't believe how much you've accomplished in just a year." I pull him into a hug, my heart swelling with love and gratitude. I couldn't have done it without your support, sweetheart. As we settle into the cozy seating area, Elijah's expression turns serious. I saw Dad yesterday, he says quietly. I feel a momentary tightness in my chest, but it passes quickly. How is he? Elijah smiles softly. He's better. He's been going to therapy, working through his issues with Grandma and Grandpa. He asked about you, actually. I raise an eyebrow, curious but not anxious. Oh, he wanted me to tell you that he's sorry for everything, and that he's proud of you, Mom, for standing up for yourself, for building this new life. Tears prick at my eyes, but they're not tears of sadness or regret. They're tears of release, of final closure on a chapter of my life that I thought would define me forever. Thank you for telling me that, Elijah, I say, squeezing his hand. I'm glad your father is finding his way. As Elijah leaves, promising to bring his wife for a visit soon, I turn back to my workbench. My hands move deftly, weaving together strands of colorful thread into an intricate pattern. Each knot, each twist represents a piece of my journey. The pain, the growth, the triumph. The bell chimes again, and I look up to see Ruth entering, her arms laden with bags of new supplies. Ready for the big craft fair this weekend? She asks, her eyes twinkling with excitement. I nod, feeling a surge of confidence. More than ready. I can't wait to share these pieces with the world. As we sort through the new materials, chatting and laughing, I'm struck by how different my life is now. The fear and uncertainty that once clouded my days have been replaced by purpose and joy. I'm no longer defined by my relationship with Gideon or my struggles with Eleanor and Vernon. I'm simply Lydia, artist, teacher, survivor. Later that evening, as I lock up the studio, I pause to look at the framed quote hanging by the door. It's the first thing I see when I enter each morning, and the last thing I see when I leave. The most beautiful things in life arise from the ashes of what we once thought we couldn't live without. I trace the words with my finger, a smile playing on my lips. How true those words have proven to be. From the ashes of my failed marriage, I've built a life more beautiful and fulfilling than I ever imagined possible. As I step out into the cool evening air, I take a deep breath, feeling the promise of tomorrow in every inhale. The path ahead is wide open, full of possibilities I'm only beginning to explore. And for the first time in decades, I'm not afraid of the unknown. I'm excited by it. I may have lost the house I once called home, but I've gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that home isn't a place. It's a feeling. It's the peace that comes from being true to yourself, the strength that grows from facing your fears, and the joy that blossoms when you finally spread your wings and fly. As I walk towards my apartment, my steps light and purposeful, I know with absolute certainty that the best chapters of my story are still to come. And I can't wait to write them, one day at a time, with my own hands and my own heart. This is not an ending. It's a beautiful, brave new beginning.